Daniel, wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you, Jay.
Tell me, how are you finding Possible so far? What's resonating as like the big topic or multiple topics?
Well, it's really bustling this year. I was here 2 years ago, the first year, and it felt like this could become the new Cannes. And I think this year is the proof of that. So there's many topics I've been hearing, right? There's the evergreens, there's CTV, there's AI now, much more, agentic. And there's this new platform, which is a vendor platform, which I think has been come up more and more, actually. So I'm glad that I'm chatting with the guy, you know?
Yeah, well, we've looked at over 1,000 vendors now, and so just being able to sit down with one of them, especially on cameras, is wonderful.
With pleasure.
So did you want to elaborate on the agentic component at all? Because I think it's clearly a buzzword. 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, I can't believe we made so much noise about agentic. But, we did viewability forever and everything else, so we might as well. What do you think marketers need to pay attention to specifically around agentic?
And I'm going to use a pun here because attention and user attention and consumer engagement is actually the most important part, I think, before you even think of agentic and workflow automation. That is deeply in my beliefs as a business that has grown out of programmatic, if you want, but has always had the mindset of the brand when we are building the tech. So agentic today in my view, is solving more of a workflow problem. Agencies looking to execute, removing the email threads in something that is different, the planning tools, the data activation. But really, there's other fundamental aspects that I think need to be addressed. And AI could be part of that as well, but it's almost the brand voice needs to come back into play.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are concerns about agentic going wrong or whatever, but if you really want to know where it goes wrong, it's in email threads. Right?
Absolutely.
So, Absolutely. Fair enough. So I want to move to the open web.
Yeah.
Something near and dear to, I think, both of our hearts. A vibrant open web is good for a lot of things, but it feels like it's at an inflection point right now.
Yeah.
More than I think it has felt in the past. What do you put your finger on there that makes that inflection point real, and what's happening?
So there's two aspects, but I think the main problem that I've always seen, but is finally being perceived, is the user experience on the open internet and the open web. That's the real problem nobody has really been touching on, and everybody has seen it as quality, as attention metrics. All those metrics, though, don't add up to actual real user consumption of the media. And AI has shown everybody there's a traffic inflection problem. So I think everybody has realized that there's more problems than just UX alone. It's the economics of the open internet that are changing, are shifting. And so having built Onetag out of the open internet, starting with Procter & Gamble in the first years of the company existence, it was all about how can we make that media more interesting, more valuable for the brands, really, right? But today, the inflection point is not just on traffic, it's on the user experience and the consumer value they can get out of it.
Tell me, as you make the user experience more valuable, right, how does Onetag contribute to that?
Well, this is thanks to a recent acquisition we made just 2 months ago of Ariel, which is a brand platform that is based on 3D creatives for brands. And what is amazing of this platform is a young team. I love the way we blended the company right into Onetag. And it's about the brands they represent. Over 200 brands in Europe that are using the platform to make a better impact on the open internet. And really understanding that the user experience that they benefit from on the work on the walled gardens can be replicated. That playbook can be seen on the open internet if you know how to address it properly.
Okay, and so maybe I'm fishing for a soundbite here, but I don't have to wear the red and blue glasses to see the 3D created, do I?
No.
Okay, tell me more.
It's all based on the phone technology. So the accelerometer on your phone allows you to see things. So with one click where you allow the prompt, it allows you to see the immersive creative.
Wow.
And to also see watches on you, the eyeglasses on you. Ray-Ban is a client. The luxury clients are all on the roster of Ariel. It's really been amazing for me to see how brands are using creative as a way to express themselves far more than what I thought. Because I come from the algorithmic optimization side. I mean, if you see Onetag on the Lumascape, it's on media optimization. That's very metric driven. what I found is that brands actually need way more than just the metrics.
Of course, and creative, we've all been in this industry a long time, and every conference has a 15-minute slot. What about the creative? And it feels like we've checked the box and we can leave the conference happy. But the creative is what the consumer sees, and that's all they care about.
Exactly. And especially there's been a disconnect in programmatic between media and creative, because
Hugely.
it's siloed, and also the automation piece you have on media has gotten to the maximum level, data as well. But then the data from creative itself is super interesting. Like there's far more data pre-click in the engagement in that creative, and all the studies are going to make after that creative production. And that's a new world I'm discovering personally, and I'm really amazed to see the value of all this.
So there's got to be some power to having the creative and the algorithmic optimization together. And I could start to guess at it, but we might be here a while. So tell me, what does that enable an advertiser or a brand or an agency to do differently than I think if you're just working with one side or the other?
It's the creative work becoming the activation route into the open internet, which is exactly what social media has built around, right? If you think what had been their advantage is they worked on the user lifetime value, right? That is their main metric, and all the rest is around that. And so the creative being the recommendation engine, ingredient they use, can be the same way in the open internet. However, it hasn't been like this. It always been the audiences, the first thing, and then you forgot about the actual ad being seen and the context where the ad is being seen, the placement itself. You can't be delivering a rich media ad that nobody's going to see. And that's also another thing. I mean, we have 50,000 high impact placements where we want to study on, which is what is the dwell time of those placements, right? And the same creative can perform very badly on a brand recall if the ad is being seen 5 seconds compared to 10. If the logo of the brand is after 6 seconds, you're wasting that impression entirely. So the value of that impression is key to measure the dwell time in combination of the brand message. And maybe you can do two forms of creative, one where the logo is in the first frame and the other one where you're telling a story.
Yeah, we don't want to forget we're doing advertising. We're actually paying money to get people to be exposed to the brand. So yeah, that's good advice. So one of the things that, having been on the agency side and talk, of course, with a lot of other agencies, buying in the walled gardens is just really easy. Everyone will take the money, but you just set it and you don't necessarily forget it. The open internet has always been a much more challenging place. It's a little like, do you want to drive in Chicago where it's all nice and gridded, or do you want to drive in Rome where you're driving in circles?
Wow. Not even.
Yeah, if you're lucky. So how can that change? If I'm a brand, and I think part of the challenge is if Meta tells me I did really well, it's quite credible.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's true, it certainly feels quite credible because they have such insight into so much. How can the open internet rise to compete with that?
I'm glad you asked the question, because that's really part of Onetag's strategy in the future.
Okay.
To building taking the playbook of social and walled gardens to open internet and allow brands to get the ease of use that social gives you, but also the control they need. Because on social media, everything looks good, but social media is, if you think of it, a publisher, right, who has the incentive of selling the media as much as they can, which is their job, and we work with 2,000 publishers on the open internet. But at the same time, the brands need more independent verification and measurement, right? And these platforms they can use are the ones we are integrating to make sure that the activity that we make on the open internet resonates with their actual incremental needs. At the same time, why social media makes it easy is that incrementality on social media is the default. They see social media as a traffic generation source. So if it's new visitors, they definitely make an impact on adding value potentially. So my view on specifics is that the 200 brands we work with directly in Europe are all asking us to help them build a creative experience from social media into programmatic, but also allowing them the activation of that to be as seamless as social media can be. And there's also a play, I believe, on the data side, where social media is very good at retaining that data, whereas brands would like to use more of that data for their own purposes. And so there can be a play where social media and programmatic work hand in hand into allowing the data to flow They're still possible, and it's something that we are building as well with the brands, because there's ways for that data to be actionable as well in social media as well as programmatic.
Fair enough. And so that brings me, and I don't want to get overly technical, but I think in the walled gardens, the decisioning not only lives completely with the walled garden, but the decisioning is obfuscated really from any part of the buy side.
Sure.
In programmatic or open web, I think the decisioning has traditionally lived a little bit closer to the publisher, or at least not on the advertiser side as much. And I'd say over the last couple of years, we've looked at some curation, custom algorithm, some other in that space. How do you see that evolving? And maybe if I'm a brand, what can I do to get as close to that decisioning as possible?
Well, there's a new wave of technology in programmatic that allows brands to get closer to media in their decisioning. And we want to be part of that, not just with the metric side of the wall, but also with the creative element together. So brands owning the creative and the way they express, and then finding on the supply side, what is the actual engagement they can get from that creative. As we said before, marrying the content and the placement with the right creative is exactly what we were trying to do. At the same time, the goal for Onetag is also to be interoperable. So to allowing this experience unbundled as well as bundled. So ease of use, you go with the bundle, but also for more sophisticated buyers who have already activation on certain partners, we can play with them as well because the elements are all interoperable and can be integrated.
Yeah, I mean, that seems really smart, obviously. And it seems like right now, the open web, or not even just the open web, but I mean the open internet as a whole, including CTV and video and everything else, it seems like it is ripe for being brought together in a smarter way. How much do brands need to customize not how they build the technology or anything, but how they build their strategy? Because when you put the money in the walled garden determines your strategy for you, really. Yeah. How much do brands need to own the ground up strategy of how to use the open internet in the best way possible?
It's the same way they should be using social media and walled gardens, right? Not conceding everything to the platforms, but using the data so they can instruct open internet and walled gardens to act on their behalf much better. And I think there's a lot of work on the data side that has to be done in order to give brands the insights and the information back so they can actually make a better informed use of the whole media space today. That is beyond the measurement of attribution that obviously walled gardens show you in a very easy way, but it's not always the full picture that brands need.
Yeah, I think if you're a home buyer and you walk into a model home and you say, well, can I customize the faucet and can I customize the cabinets? And they say no, you get upset. But if you walk in and there's nothing there and they ask you to start building from scratch, you say I'm overwhelmed and you leave.
100%.
And so I think the open internet maybe has yet to find that starting point balance where it is so composable.
100%.
Today.
It's too composable.
Right. And so it can be overwhelming and it can feel like a jungle. But at the same time, I think what I'm hearing you say is there's an architecture that you can start with, right? That starts with smart media, smart algorithms, and good creative. And then composing the rest of it.
Correct.
It sounds like what you're doing is composing the rest of it with enough customization, but not so much that it's overwhelming.
100%. Because that's really where the social media platforms are winning because they are in that sweet spot. However, there's always that balance between control that you need on what you're doing and the platform's own AI. There's recent coverage about the AI taking over on decisions that the brands should be keeping for themselves, right? And that is definitely the architecture we're building, trying to find the activation layer, which could also be agentic, as we said at the beginning. Because in the end, we don't want to be another managed service platform, but we believe that the agentic interface can help get the brand's activation so smoother that it becomes a new default to walled gardens and open internet planning.
Okay, so I want to get back to the Ariel acquisition because I love the media and creative combination. We all recognize that 30 years ago, we decoupled media and creative. And I think most people today would say that was a mistake. Maybe not a mistake for P&L and business on the agency side and everything, but from a consumer value prop and brand value prop point of view. Can AI be what brings that back together, how much of it can be AI and how much of it has to be human ingenuity? Tell me how you're thinking about that.
That is a great question, Jay, because that's really what we saw in Ariel as the potential to get media and creative back together, and also to give the brand experience the value it deserves. Because there's a play AI can make on blending the content and the creative together in a way that today is not possible. Mostly because, again, it's all siloed. So, there's some great contextual. Onetag has a great contextual graph. But then again, you're feeding off the content that is existing, and the creative is often unrelated to most other aspects of the user. So the three pillars of the context, the content, the data, and the creative need to play the way they play in the social media and walled gardens platforms, because that's the only way you can actually make it impactful. The difference with social media, though, is that open internet, and I think that's a big value to add, is that it's a content-rich experience. And I think there's big value for the end user experience if that content experience is back to where it should be, right? Which is away from the passive scrolling that you do on social media and into actually a discovery of the brand values through the content itself. And that's leading into new ideas that we have that are pushed to us from the brands that are telling a story, that are using the platform Onetag and Ariel are combining together, that is telling the brand story in a different way.
Yeah, and maybe as a follow-up to that, one thing I think the walled gardens have done very well, Meta more than anybody, is they've figured out exactly how often they can show an ad without the user bailing while maximizing ad revenue.
Yeah.
And if I go to a local newspaper site, pick your city, they have clearly not figured that out, because there is a pop-up and then there's a pop-up over the pop-up. And then when you close out the pop-up over the pop-up, a pop-under happens. And so it's almost impossible to use.
Correct.
And so there are a lot of sites on the open internet that I think have done that. And I understand mathematically they figured out they're making more money, but the people who tolerate that won't live forever.
Correct.
So how can AI help the publisher maybe bring media and creative better together to help revenue per page matter, right, while delivering a good ad experience so that buyers value it more and want to pay more?
This is exactly the direction we're taking,
okay,
where publishers have a big important role in this because their audiences like the content publishers produce, right? However, the user experience is being damaged by the economics of that. And so I believe creative, in a new blended way, where creative becomes not just the standard unit in the page, but much more, can become the way for publishers to regain control over the audiences and the brands to tell a different story. So we're really thinking about building an AI platform for the publishers as well that allows them to integrate creative in a different way into their pages with a new user experience that is definitely going to be a good, rich, and mindful experience for the brands as well, and which is different from the scrolling in on social media, which I think the big other value is that it's not interruptive, whereas on the web, it's always been interruptive. That's the other big aspect. Even YouTube, which is great in terms of like the premium video, if you want, has been interruptive as an experience. So I think we should be looking back at using AI and the generative element to go back at doing a non-interruptive experience on the web.
Yeah, I mean, I think consumers may look back on the open web and regret how little they appreciated the fact that the whole thing you were trying to see didn't go away just because there was an ad.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so the open internet, let's assume it's gonna succeed. What's next? What are we gonna see with the open internet? What are the biggest inflection points that will make this the value proposition that we all know it deserves?
So as we said before, AI is changing the economics, and also the long tail is changing, and maybe the lifestyle long tail is gone almost. The traffic reduction is really important, and I think gets back to the value of those impressions that are left on the premium content. However, the user experience is still not matching the content that people read because it's rich, because it's insightful. And so I just make an analogy where, like, if you spend 30 minutes on Instagram, you don't feel happy at the end. Whereas if you,
correct,
it's something that we all know, right? I mean, and you start from a story, from a message, and then you end up in that scrolling phase. instead of content, is enriching, right? You read things, you understand new perceptions. So it's really about how can that be back to the basics of user experience together with that content. So I think the open internet has a fundamental role, especially the open web, to get back to that position where it's enriching the lives of people and not getting ads in their faces with free pop-ups.
Yeah, and I do think even with recent court rulings and other decisions, payouts, et cetera, that not the turning point has happened, but we've gone from 0% responsibility for the user experience in social media to maybe 2% now. But the break from zero, I think, is very meaningful. And I do also think that there's that potential for the open web, open internet as a whole to recapture some value, because it has not spent however many years making people sad after 30 minutes, in theory. I think that's my new line.
You get angry in 1 minute if you have 3 ads in front of you. So different.
Oh God, yeah. There you go. Okay, so I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, if contextual was as valuable as people say it is, then Wilson Footballs would buy out the Super Bowl. And maybe hyperbole there, but there's a difference between content and context interest and endemic content relevance, right? So, I've done a lot of automotive in my career. Certainly there are automotive websites or apps or whatever it is that you want to be on, but people who are in the market for a new car tend to consume certain types of content, especially if you're in the market for a Mercedes versus a Kia versus et cetera. How do you think about the balance between endemic and interest level content? Because I don't know what is endemic to the Grammys. Maybe music, I guess, right? But other than that, jewelry.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I was reading an article about this actually the other day, which was looking at contextual and the moment, right? That was super interesting, where you can see that the context tells you something about the brand that should go there, but the moment of the day wasn't for that.
That's it.
So you basically are showing something that is irrelevant, totally irrelevant to the life of that person in that moment. So that is one component that adds in. And the other element, if you think of a graph model, is that you can build adjacent categories of context. Right. So, which is what platforms like ours do on the data side, if you want.
Okay.
But there's a middle ground where I think, because data is not always addressable, you have identified problems. So if you use context in a different way, you make it 3D in the dimension of time, of moment, and also of adjacent categories, that is where you build a new way of doing contextual.
Yeah, so I think that's really smart, because adjacent to automotive, factoring in the z-axis of time, adjacent to automotive afterward might be economics news, but beforehand it might be something completely different, right? I mean, maybe it is sports, and sports makes people want to buy cars. Who knows? But so I think that's a really smart way of thinking about it, and I think, for folks who are interested, I'm sure you have a lot more data on that you could share and
absolutely
and enlighten.
What I realized is that we've worked so much on building Onetag as a very price performant, like value exchange, like what we call ourselves today, which is really giving back the value that brands need, and also to the agencies that we work with. And the data that we have has always been own use. So actually being able to license that data and provide that as an asset to the brands, as we said before, I think that could be very interesting.
Yeah, it does sound, just what I've learned just from this discussion alone is the value of value of context and a contextual graph, the value of the creative paired with it, the value of algorithmic that gets added into that is a pretty holistic solution that comes together. And I think, there's a lot of agencies and brands that would be wise to take a look at that and understand it a lot better.
100%.
That's just me saying that, of course. You might be biased.
Oh, well, definitely. I think that's some great ideas as well, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jay.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed this.
It's been great being here, and good luck. Can't wait to hear how it's going.
Thanks so much. See you soon.